Are you ready to learn about solving people pleasing through shadow work? My name is Amy Ballantyne, and welcome to Power to the People Pleasers. I'm so excited to welcome my two guests here today, Britton and Carolee Beckham. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, Amy. It's good to be here.
I'm really excited. I haven't often had a discussion with two people at the same time, but I know that we're going to have a great one. Getting to meet you both, you have such cool stories, and I know you're doing great work in the world. So I'd love to know, because we always ask this question at the beginning: have you ever been a people pleaser? And if so, how did that show up in your life? And I'll let you decide who wants to go first there.
I'll go first. um, I think I was raised as a people pleaser, right? Like
Mhm.
it was kind of part of just who I was supposed to be, right? We were both raised in a high demand religious organization that required a lot from us, and our life wasn't really ever our own. It wasn't like I was given this idea from a young childhood that I could have my own dreams. I mean, I did. I had my own dreams and my own things that I did, but it was all from this idea of who I was supposed to become within the context of the organization with where we were raised and my family culture. And it wasn't until I began to heal that I even learned what the word codependent meant. And
Mm.
when I first learned, I was like late 30s, deep in the healing journey. I hear this word for the first time, and I had to go study it, research it, reread the definition multiple times, and it described me perfectly up to that point in
Mm.
almost every relationship, every capacity. Yeah, very much so was very programmed to people please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
for me, I was less of an individual people pleaser, although there was a lot of that within our relationship, right?
Mm.
But I was people pleasing to organizations, to my religion, to my society, to the culture of the Mormon Church, and even when I was what made me decide to go serve a mission for the church was really around the fact that I couldn't. It seemed like impossible to get married unless I was a return missionary for the church. So I went because I needed to, you know what I'm
Mm.
saying? So
Mhm.
yeah, like people pleasing, it's sort of funny. We look back on it now and we're like so disconnected from it.
Mm.
But even as parents, though, you still have to get through that too. So like, there's still some of that that goes on within the family structure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And before we dig into this conversation any further, I want to make sure that I share your bio here. So, Britton and Carolee were raised in the strict dogma of the Mormon Church, with infidelity threatening their marriage and family. They found themselves at the cliff's edge. We're going to talk about that. Through a deep commitment to heal, these two left everything they knew to find themselves. Over a period of 5 years, they rebooted their relationship and traveled to the world seeking their truth, with four kids in tow, and they have emerged on the other side as embodied and awakened couple with a powerful message. So I'm so grateful for you being here, and for you stepping into the, well, I know we're going to talk about shadow work, but stepping into the light of sharing
Mhm.
how things have impacted your life. And because of you, taking the stage and speaking these words, I know that you're going to help even more people. So I want to celebrate you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm. So let's jump in. There's a number of words I want to make sure people are clear on. We're here talking about shadow work. What the heck do you mean?
Yeah, so shadow work is a term that was coined by Carl Jung a long time ago in his literature. And it basically is the idea of walking into the shadows of our psyche. You know,
Mm.
what is going on in the mind that we aren't actually aware of.
Mm.
And when we talk about doing shadow work, it means that what we're doing is we're trying to shed light or light upon those areas that are dark and bring
Mm.
awareness to them. And within those shadows are actually the patterns that make us small, the patterns that hold us back, the patterns that actually create all of the problems in our life,
Mhm.
like people pleasing, for example. This
Mhm.
is a huge collective shadow. And so shadow work is resolving those things and actually transcending them.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that, because basically that's what I do. But I've never
That
called
is the
it
path
that.
of healing. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
so
exactly.
cool. Yeah, very cool. Okay. And so you have these experiences. Do you want to go back and share how did you get to the place where you were realizing work was required, growth was required? How did you get to this place?
Well, I think we knew early on that that was the case, obviously, when you're dealing with a problem like infidelity in a marriage. But how much or what, how to do it, none of those questions we had answers to. And so
Mhm.
that was the journey. And it started with us walking through the process of the Mormon church for to try and resolve infidelity. And as we did it, it was like a year-long thing, and it was mostly just a punitive disciplinary thing. It really had no healing factor to it at all. It had no, like, understanding of shadows. In
Mhm.
fact, that concept doesn't even register within the confines of the Mormon church.
Right. Wow.
Um, so after that and it failed us, that's when we started getting really discontented with the church and then started to explore more options. But it wasn't like until a full year later where we came across, uh, well, our first big shadow work journey was through psilocybin experience.
Tell me more.
So, we had at this point I'll kind of give a little bit of a timeline, right? We met in 2008 at church. We got married in 2009.
Mhm.
By 2011, we had our first child. And then we had our second in 2014, our third in 2016. In 2017, there was a big rupture, a big incident of infidelity and betrayal. Now, infidelity, betrayal was something that had its tentacles in the earlier parts of our marriage too. There were points. It wasn't just like, yeah, there was just ways in which the agreements of our relationship weren't honored. And
Mhm.
neither one of us knew how to actually make healthy agreements that weren't somebody else's idea, somebody else's conditioning, right? And
Wow.
so, um, when those agreements weren't honored, we didn't really actually know how to reconcile them in a healthy way. So a lot of times it was kind of just brushing it under the rug. Let's not really talk about it. Let's go on. But the one in 2017 was pretty significant, and that facilitated us moving. I was like, I can't do this. We're going to go to therapy or we're not staying together, right? And so then we
Right.
dove into therapy, and then we did what Britton mentioned, and we went into the church's process of
Right.
how do you address something as severe, significant as infidelity, as betrayal within a marriage. And that led us into the experience with the church where it was called, Britton was disfellowshipped. So he received this punitive kind of, for a full year, here's the list of things you can and can't do in regards to the church and your membership and your activity and how you present, and you know and as we went through that whole year long process, um it was actually more traumatizing for me. What I thought was supposed to hold me, I remember being so excited when we first had that meeting, and I was like, "We're doing this. He's doing the right steps. He's
Yeah.
doing the things everybody says you're supposed to do." And then as the year evolved, and even at that first meeting, at the end of it, I was like, "That wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be."
Mm.
From the point of a woman being supported, a
Yeah.
woman being held in her pain and her story as well. There was no space for that for me.
Mhm.
And so, like Britton mentioned, we dove into really doing it their way for an entire year and learned so much about how it didn't actually work to heal the
Mhm.
root. And that facilitated us into the space where we were doing therapy, we were doing couples therapy, we were doing like a trauma informed yoga therapy, and then we were also reading a lot of new books.
Mm.
We were conversations with God, but
Mm.
was really, really important.
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. We were reading these different things, and then the book How to Change Your Mind came
Mhm.
into our awareness. And so we read that book and understood that we could approach a psilocybin journey from a very intentional space for healing. And so in November of 2019, we had our very first psilocybin journey, and it was beautiful. And having not really found that much success in all of the other healing endeavors, to drop into this kind of ceremony, and come out on the other side. And I felt like it was equivalent to 5 years of therapy for me personally. And I had had
Oh,
so much trauma, right? Like the trauma of the betrayal highlighted traumas from my childhood,
mm,
traumas from my life that went beyond, right? And so we dropped into this ceremony. It was on a Saturday. And then we actually went to church the following day. I know it's not
wow.
funny.
Mhm.
Wow.
Um, and, talking about people pleasing, there was
Mhm,
a program that kids were performing and grandma was
mhm.
coming and we didn't really want to go, but we had all these people
Didn't
pleasing
wanna go.
tendencies.
Yeah.
But it was a blessing because it's actually what got us
Yeah.
out.
So,
Yeah.
grandma was coming, and anyway, we sat there in that service watching the children up on the stand being whispered into their ears the parts that they were supposed to say, and we just realized it was just so much indoctrination, on things that we didn't want our children actually to be indoctrinated on.
Literally indoctrinating them to people please.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And so we looked at each other and we just knew, and we walked out of church that day and we never went back. That was the last day. Like it was a clear, kind of clean cut for us. But
Wow.
that wasn't, I mean, there was still quite a journey
Mhm.
to discover more about how to unwind the codependency and the
Mhm.
ways in which we had been raised to think first about what others wanted us to
Mm.
do.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing and opening up in this way so we have the context of where all this came from. Holy crap is all that's all I can say. Um,
and that's the light
so
version.
well, I know, right? Wow. So so here we are together today talking about solving people pleasing through shadow work. What question is the right next question for me to ask you, or what's the right next answer in where we need to go to support people who may be facing similar or have bits of similarities in what you're sharing?
Yeah, so actually it was the very next part of our journey. So we quit church, quit the Mormon religion. This is a big deal. We were sixth generation Mormons. That means that our ancestors were the first people baptized into the church back in the early 1800s.
Wow.
So what happened to us next is 4 days later, we ended up at this, experience, which was at a building in, a city near where we lived, and the experience was a sound bath. I don't know if you've ever done, like,
Oh, yeah.
shamanic sound healing or sound baths by
Yeah.
sound healers, and we went there. We'd never done anything like this before. We were invited by the woman that actually guided us through the psilocybin journey, and so we get there, and Carolee finds out that this is like a school that is
Mhm.
um, the intention of the school is to like help teach people about emotional intelligence and actually teach them a process of how to integrate all of the past emotions that are unprocessed.
Mhm.
So it was a really awesome thing, and it had some positive side effects of like or positive aspects to where we could help our children as well. So she got really turned on by all of that, and then I was really excited about sound healing, and so so this school was the place that we went to for, like, the next year. She
Mhm.
did a whole certification in it. But the point is that, like, what happened at this point was Carolee began to understand during this year-long experience how emotionally entangled in codependence we were, right? With people
Mhm.
pleasing in our relationship. She was probably a much stronger one, but in a way that enabled me to fall into my own shadow there of
Yeah.
allowing it, which is a form of, enablement is a form of basically pleasing, and
Yeah.
it's not a conscious way of having a relationship. And so we were both enmeshed in a really unhealthy way. And we spent that whole year in 2020, basically 2020 and 2021, working very, very hard on unwinding all of that codependence, and we became really good at like looking at it, seeing it, understanding it, then talking about it, and it
Mm.
became this process that we did. So it was for us, the immediate thing was like the universe was like, hey, you guys finally cut off
Mm.
the paradigm that was holding you back from your healing. Now
Yeah.
here's how you can heal. And we just jumped straight into it, and we were
Oh,
all
wow.
very gung-ho.
Yeah. Wow. And so when you think about individuals who may be resonating with what you're talking about, what's the first step that you recommend? for them?
When do you mean in regards to like relationship stuff or just
Well, a
in general?
relationship like codependence, you're talking about codependence and people pleasing showing up in there, and the healing path.
Mhm.
You you know, you said you became aware and then you did some things and you talked about it. What's the first step if someone's saying, "Sheesh, I think I have a codependent relationship. I think I'm people pleasing." Where do they start?
Well, the first thing I would just say, is we're all people pleasing. Like, this is a collective problem. This is a problem that's human wide.
Yeah.
There isn't a person on the planet that isn't guilty of this form of relationship. So,
Mhm.
the first thing is we're all doing it. So the question is, where are you doing it?
Mhm.
And the easiest way to begin to understand that is to do some inward processing, right? We look
Mhm.
at ourselves, and like Carolee said earlier, she looked up the definition of codependence. She began to study it. And so
Mhm.
I would say for anyone, like, there's many, many books out there that are like more modern and simpler psychology books that are about shadow work that don't
Mhm.
have to you don't have to be a wizard on the mental paradigms of human
Yeah.
consciousness to understand the shadow. And those are really good. One of them is like The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. That was one that we read and we
Mhm.
were recommended, and it was really powerful, and gave us a lot of insight into how we could see our own shadow more, because like
Mhm.
these people pleasing shadows, they're very, very subtle. And it puts us into this like dance with other people where we're not really saying our true intention, or we're doing things,
Mhm.
in this uncommunicated intent, like purpose, and so everything becomes sort of tainted in the relationship with this underlying reason that we're doing everything. It's not a real
Mhm.
authentic reason, and it binds us into these really karmic, ugly relationships that need a lot of healing. So I would
Mhm.
say the first step for me would recommend to your audience, like anybody that's listening, look at some literature around how you can free yourself from codependence.
Well,
Mhm.
and speaking of literature, we actually are writing a book that will be out later this year, and it's called Ritual Shadow Work. And
Okay.
what we're sharing in that is actually the method that is the synthesis of, I did this year-long program, like we mentioned in 2020, where I
Mhm.
learned how to integrate all of these different modalities into this process to do inner child work, right? But there
Mm.
was more than that that came into our life. There were some cosmic kind of connections through
Mhm.
astrology that began to illuminate and hold me in my shadows, right? And there were other elements that just kind of started to come to us intuitively, and we've synthesized all of that into the program that we've coined as ritual shadow work. It describes
Right.
how we work with these elements. And so I guess if I were to say, there's actually two things that I would say that could be an action step today.
Mhm.
The first would be to give yourself permission, right? Like, where is your yes and where is your no? That was one of the thing that we did later on, in like the end of 2021, leading into 2022. We got this idea. Britton had read this other book, right? Um, that we were going to live what we called the full fuck yes. And
Mm.
then we realized that so much of our life, I mean, he mentioned earlier he went on a mission for the Mormon church because he wanted to get married and people wouldn't
Yeah.
marry him. I would not have married him had he not been a returned missionary. Like,
Wow.
straight up, that was a requirement.
There's
You
a
gotta
program.
It was a program, right?
Yeah.
And so he didn't really wanna, it's like these things, right? So we decided that there was so much that we weren't allowing ourselves to actually experience in our life because we were so deeply programmed, and we were willing to put that program on the table in front of us and say, we're setting that there. What is it that what is my yes? So that would be a first step. Like, what's your yes? Some of our yeses that year when we decided to live this full fuck yes, we were like, let's take the kids on a trip. Let's do
Yeah.
a 200-hour yoga teacher training.
Mm.
Let's have a sexual re-education,
Mm.
right? Because so much of our wounding had to do around our sexuality and
Yeah.
infidelity and betrayal. That's what it's all about, right? And so we gave ourselves permission to find
Mm.
that yes. So that would be like the one thing. But the second thing that I want to just touch on is actually, in this present moment, there's this astrological blueprint of the cosmos that illuminates what we're really going through. And I found this in a really intuitive way. It literally started, I just started bathing with the moon. Oh,
Mm,
the moon's full, I'm going to take a bath. Oh, the moon's new, I'm going to take a bath. But I was given a book that talked about making a tea blend
mm,
with the moon phase. And so it became this ritual.
mm,
And I began to make a tea and I'd add it to my bath water and I'd light some candles and have a glass of wine.
mm.
And I was taking a bath with the moon. And all of a sudden, my life really actually began to shift. The
Wow.
moon is the illumination of our shadows. It really shows us. It's the moon holds our emotional state of being, right? And so the work that we do and what we're going to be sharing in ritual shadow work is how to use the moon, how to cultivate a relationship with the moon to illuminate the present. We have clients that we work with and we teach them how to do this for themselves. And it's been profound that the stories, the patterns, the things that are looping and repeating actually can be explained through the moon illumination. I mean, we had a profound call with a client yesterday where things are really coming up for her and
Mm,
it's really rooted in people pleasing. And my coaching through the illumination of the moon was like, maybe it'd be really important to say no to this one behavior. Put this boundary that you're not going to do this one thing for people for 2 months. Like, step back and honor
mm.
that. Right. And I had to do that for myself. I had to break up with my mom during my healing, where I was like, Mom, we're not doing this. 2 months is what I did. And
Yeah.
it was really hard for her. Today's her birthday, actually. I love my mother. Happy
Mm,
birthday, Mom.
yeah.
It was really hard for her, but when we came back after setting that boundary, after saying, "I can identify that I'm not showing up in my own truth in this relationship, I need to step back from it, and then
Mm,
I can re-engage when I'm ready." I mean, our relationship has ha it's an entirely different relationship, it's so improved, right? So
mm.
those are some, like, high level kind of touching in, but yeah, those are what I would say.
Oh, I love that, and I appreciate the strategic, uh, things that people can take away from this and practice and be excited about getting your book so they have even more information when that comes out. So, the one thing that came up for me, and I appreciate you sharing the boundary around your mom, and I'm curious to hear what you would say. So often people say, "Oh, well, that would be so hard." And my response is, "Well, which heart are you choosing?" Right? Like,
Right,
which heart are you choosing? You wanna stay in
right.
this kind of life? So I'm curious, what would your response be when your client says or you say, "What about these boundaries?" And they say, "Oh, this would be hard." What would you 2 say?
So what you're really referring to is fear.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be hard. Oh, I don't really wanna do that. But deep down, they actually think that, like, fear is different than something that doesn't resonate. When something doesn't
Mm,
resonate, it's just no appeal whatsoever. That's not a feeling of being scared. Fear is a feeling of being scared, and you're scared to do it because you don't know the outcome,
mhm,
and it's better to be in this pattern, this dance, than to
mm,
pursue something that has an unpredictable outcome. So, but here is the key, and this is something that Carolee and I learned, and this is going in the book, Ritual Shadow Work, because this is such a fundamental part of solving the people pleasing paradigm within our own shadows, and that is that fear is a portal into what you want. So, if you
yeah,
really want something like an improved relationship, say with mother, father, child, whatever, or spouse, and there is a fear associated with a change in that particular, relationship, it's actually through that portal of fear that you get what you want.
mm,
And so fear is never actually trying to deter us away. What fear is trying to do is call us into the psyche, call us into the depths
mm,
of ourself so that we can explore the shadow. So the fear in the shadow work, or, resolving people pleasing, is directly connected. And so I
mm.
would encourage people, like, if they're feeling a fear about making a shift in their relationship, then that's actually the thing they need to do.
Yeah, run towards it, right? Feel the fear and
Run
go
Yeah.
toward it,
anyways.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What about you,
You know,
Carolee?
yeah, I was gonna say, we would often get this question, part of the story is that when we decided to live that full yes and give ourselves permission, within 6 months, we were selling our house, everything we owned, and moving our family to Bali.
Yeah.
People really thought we lost our mind, and we kind of had. You kind of have to, like, lose your mind to, like, find yourself, because
Yeah.
our minds are in the way of who we really are here to become, right?
Mhm.
But, like, as we're traveling the world with our 4 kids, I'd get this thing all the time, like, "Oh, that would be so hard." And I'm like, "Guys, being a parent is hard.
Yes.
It doesn't
Doesn't
matter
matter where you are.
where you are." So if I would say this, if I can be living in this house made of salt and earth right next to this beautiful mosque tower in this ancient oasis in the Sahara on the edge of Egypt, and have the hard that I would have, like, in suburban Utah, I'd give me Egypt, like, give me something cool to do, right? So, it's like life is that challenge, but what hard do you wanna choose? And are you
Right.
willing to, like, dive into the discovery of yourself? It's a beautiful journey, and the very thing, like, fear is the same as excitement. It's just how we read it in our own system. Think about people that are on a cliff's edge ready to jump into this water. There are those, like myself, who stand there for 20 minutes unable to actually go, right? Like,
Yeah.
"Ah." And then
Ah.
there's those who are like, time and time again. I think of the guy who free soloed that one
El
mountain, El
Capitan.
Capitan,
Mhm.
yeah. He free soloed it, like, my whole body would be so terrified to do it, and he's not feeling anything different. He's
Mhm.
just
Going anyway.
excited about that
Mhm.
sensation, right?
Mhm.
So if we can look at our fear and be excited about the possibility on the other side, it's like taking a chance on yourself.
Mhm.
What could life be like if you said, "Okay, you know, I'm gonna choose to do things differently." And there's a way to do this that actually burns bridges and, like, destroys relationships, but
Mhm.
or there's a way to just come into the choice of choosing yourself with love, and you
Mhm.
have to learn boundaries. You have to really re-educate yourself. Sometimes at the early stages of all of this, for our own story, we didn't have the knowledge to know how to really guide ourselves through it in a healthy way, and we were learning that slowly and quickly, through our own experience, which is why we feel it's so important to talk about these things and even make ourselves available for guiding others through their own shadow, to holding it and
Mhm.
illuminating difficult truths, right? The things we discover about ourselves when we are willing to be honest can sometimes be really disappointing to ourselves, right? I remember
Mhm.
when I discovered judgments, I was like, oh, this feels really ugly to admit this about myself. But how freeing it was to acknowledge it, admit it, and then by the mere fact of admitting it, seeing it, witnessing it in partnership too, it like got lighter.
Yeah. Allows
It
to
like
let it go, right?
it went away. Yeah.
Wow. My friends, I think we could talk all day. I'm so pumped for your book. Truly. I'm excited to learn from you, and I know many people will be as well who are listening to this. And I'm curious, as we wrap up this, solving people pleasing through shadow work, what are the final messages that each of you would like to share?
One of the things that I feel like I'd like to share is that with shadow work, there's this. So I teach basically in the coaching that I do that shadow work and manifestation work are the same thing.
Mm.
They're just two sides of one coin, just like electricity and magnetism, right? They call it electromagnetism. You could call it shadow manifestation. Although we don't want to manifest our shadows. That's what we're doing already. We just want
Yeah,
to be
I
conscious
know.
creators. So
Yeah.
what we want to do is step out of that unconscious creation and create consciously. And
Mm.
so when we work with our shadow, meaning that we're integrating, we're discovering, we're healing, we're actually creating a new future. We're getting out of the timeline that we're in and we're stepping into a higher timeline because now that we don't have that negative energy that's actually keeping us in an orbit of an older timeline. And so as we step into doing shadow work, what you're really calling in is a new life. And when you step into calling in something in your life, like when you're manifesting, you will be given the opportunity to address the shadows that are in the way of that experience. So they are exactly the same thing, just looked at it from a different perspective. But so that I would offer the inspiring idea to people that, hey, this is the work. This is why Carolee and I are so passionate about it, and people like yourself are so passionate about it, because we know the results, and the results are incredibly powerful. So it's not something that you just get into and it's all drudgery and walking through the mud. There's incredible beauty and amazing quick manifestations that come from making changes in your life.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes, thank you. Carolee, what about you?
Oh, it's almost like, what do I say? There's so many things that I could just
Mm.
say about this topic. And ultimately, finding yourself is the greatest act of courage. We are heroes and heroines of our own story. And if we can love the part of us that people pleased, if we can love the part of us, we behaved in this way because it actually was giving us safety. It actually was providing us connection. It actually was the way in which things felt like they worked. But part of this awakening is for us to acknowledge that it worked and it served. And yet we're ready for it to be different. We're ready to evolve out of those patterns that kept us not knowing ourselves. And so I guess my heart's just bursting to say, have courage to love yourself, right? Because it really life,
That's at the root of the people pleasing problem,
yeah,
is lack of self love.
and trust that what gets disclosed to yourself about yourself will be something. My cat's about ready to climb up on my just have courage to love who you are.
Aw,
Hey, Jax.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for this inspiring conversation today. We could go on for quite a long time, I think, diving into this, but I know it was a very valuable discussion for myself to learn from you and for those who are listening. So I do want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Amy.
And
Yeah.
may I add that if anyone it resonates with our work and wants to be, stay in tune, be the first to know when our book is out, or even interested in working with us in this capacity, having us support you with through the illumination of the moon, supporting what that actually is bringing up from the context of releasing patterns of people pleasing. Our website is themagicalstoryofus.com, and we have free discovery calls, various coaching programs, ways in which people can connect with this process now. You don't have to wait till our book comes out. You can connect with us now,
Yeah.
and then be the first to know. And yeah, I love that my cat just joined the call.
Well, it was time, right? Yes, and I will drop all of those links in the show notes as well for people to connect with you, and I hope that they do because you are doing amazing work in this world, and I'm thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amy, for
Thanks, Amy.
having us.
And to all the listeners, I want to thank you once again for tuning into Power to the People Pleasers. Stay tuned for the next episode coming.